everyone, Piner and Apple here with the first part of the MCU's Phase 2, Iron Man 3. A movie I think previously I've been gaslit into not enjoying, as now having seen it again, it was far better than I remember. But does that make this movie a smash hit? I'm not so sure. Iron Man 3 deals with the fallout of Phase 1 and continues Tony Stark's story, once again played by Robert Downey Jr., and is directed by Shane Black, being his only MCU film. There were a lot of divisive decisions with this movie, and when it comes to the plot, a lot of them becoming confused in the later movies, unceremoniously dropped here or hated upon release, but in retrospect may be pretty clever, even if they piss off some of the comic fans. This makes the movie feel pulled in many directions, not all points making sense after thinking on them in context with the future of the MCU. But when it comes to the movie in isolation, we do have a few problems to point out. But whether or not the great points outweigh these issues, we'll see by the end. So why don't we start the film? We start off with footage of Tony's Malibu house and his suits being blown up as he tries to pontificate as a narrator. But with a jarring tonal shift, we cut to 1999 with Blue Dubba D playing. Tony is his old, suave but also asshole self. And after the good visual gag of his outfit but more so Happy's look, we get a great reference to the first film as Sean Taub reprises his role from the first film, making a cameo as Yinsen, which is really depressing but a great detail to have here as he ignores and forgets him. Tony is joined by his current woman, scientist Maya Hansen, played by Rebecca Hall, and is accosted by Aussie actor Guy Pearce, who looks like the male equivalent of films where they put glasses and other cosmetics on a clearly attractive woman to make their glow up later in the film shocking, playing Aldrich Killian, who is just super desperate for Tony to hear his ideas. And for the second time of the night, Tony talks to someone and leaves them high and dry, Killian waiting for Tony on the roof alone in the cold. While that villain origin story is happening, Tony and Maya talk about their research while Happy slapsticks around. Her research affecting the brain and allowing accelerated regeneration, displayed well as Happy assaults a plant and it regrows its leaves. Tony leaves her the next day as she works in her underwear, and he never saw her or the limping Aldrich again. Present day Tony is cracked out of his mind, conducting experiments, allowing him to call parts of his suit to his body on command, with varying success as a Christmas hip-hop song plays. That's right, this is a Christmas movie, but more Die Hard than Hallmark. It's a fun enough scene, but after we get the start of a pretty imposing threat that I'm sure will live up to everyone's expectations, the Mandarin, played by Ben Kingsley. And although we will learn other things about the character, the style and propaganda videos, while not very authentic to the original character, do work in setting up a pretty imposing villain. It's just the landing that we'll have to watch out for. The President, played by William Sadler, isn't having any luck, so he calls in the big guns, repainting Rhodey's suit and introducing him to the masses as Iron Patriot, ready to fight the war on terror. The media don't love it, not even Joan Rivers is having it, but I do like the paint job. Tony takes the piss with Rhodey, but as they talk and Tony tries to get info on the Mandarin and his bombings, mentions of the last film and some drawings cause Tony to start having a panic attack, running into his suit thinking he's dying and escaping. Meanwhile at Stark Industries, Happy is getting too big for his britches as the head of security, and Mrs. Goop herself, Gwyneth Paltrow, reprises her role as Pepper, meeting with a yassified Aldrich Killian, with no strange facial movements, no limp, and no glasses. Happy is suspicious of Aldrich and his minion, and Aldrich wants Pepper to invest in Extremis, which is what Maya was working on earlier. His demonstration is actually pretty clever, and the CGI looks great, but Pepper isn't super receptive. Tony is warned, but is again uninterested. Aldrich tries to play on Pepper and Tony's straining relationship as Tony fails to deal with his issues, and Happy continues to take interest in Aldrich and his security, working for both him and AIM. Advanced Idea Mechanics, a name that thanks to watching several Marvel cartoons, I would have immediately jumped on as being the evil guys, even if they don't run around in strange yellow suits. Tony tries to talk to Pepper, the conversation good, but it turns out he's still in the lab, using his suit to talk to her instead of doing it himself, avoiding their date entirely. Pepper is rightfully angry with him, but Tony admits he has a problem. The candid conversation working quite well, whereas Tony in the first movie would have been much more insufferable. Tony can't asleep, too ramped up and scared after what happened in New York, which is a really good angle for this movie to take, and in isolation works very well, even if it does get pushed to the wayside later. But there are a few aspects of Tony's character development that happen later on in the film that by Age of Ultron are just sort of forgotten about. But to make the divide clear, just because they're ruined by a later movie doesn't mean they work here any less. Tony tries to sleep but freaks out so bad that the armor invades the bedroom, sufficiently freaking Pepper out enough to sleep on the couch, but meanwhile Happy is on a mission of his own at the Chinese theatre, following Killian's minion to a soldier, dealing what looks like drugs, and even though it goes wrong, it's nice to see Happy with some agency, and actually be kind of competent, unlike the last film where he punched one guy and relatably stared at Scarlett Johansson's breasts. Happy does the old bump routine, stealing a dose, but shows his hand too early as the minion confronts him. But after injury, it seems Extremis works on people now, as his wounds heal, but after the soldier takes a dose, he instead combusts in a fireball, killing many, only leaving his dog tags and Happy's injured body, the henchman walking away as his body heals. It's a really good scene altogether and ties into the plot well, not only in getting Tony off his ass, but in tying into the Mandarin plot as he takes credit for the explosion. Tony visits Happy in the hospital and we get to see how badly it affects him, as a really shitty guy comes in to film his reaction, and Tony in his rage insults the Mandarin and asks for a 1v1, literally giving out his address and breaking the asshole's phone. With some totally bullshit tech that I'm not really buying, Tony recreates the attack with holograms, finding the soldier's dog tags as if he was using Batman's detective vision. Tony connects a similar explosion that had nothing to do with the Mandarin, the death of a soldier in Tennessee, and is resolute to head out there, but gets a car at the door. Out of the car comes Meeee, who Tony barely remembers, but gets some good lines with.
Please don't tell me there's a 12-year-old kid waiting in the car that I've never met.
He's 13. No.
As Pepper is leaving due to the whole terrorist threat thing, but the news manages to detect incoming missiles before the security system, starting a great set piece as the Mandarin's choppers led by Killian's minion, one day I'll figure out his name, start leveling Tony's home. He puts the suit on Pepper, allowing her and Meeee to escape the chaos, but after getting the armor back, Tony fails to destroy all the choppers, leaving the minion to escape, and Tony, along with the mansion, falling into the sea. I don't really care about the house, but poor dummy is presumed dead, and that's the real tragedy. Tony starts taking on water and only just manages to escape, waking up mid-flight on his way to Tennessee, losing power but dropping into the snow. And that is the end of the Malibu house. And it was a pretty good set while it lasted, but at least it wasn't just written out, it was given a pretty good action scene to go out in. So Tony is left in the snowy forest without power, dragging his suit to the nearest gas station. He sends Pepper a message apologizing and telling her he's keeping on his mission, breaking into someone's garage to start fixing the suit. He starts but is held hostage by a kid, who is excited to see the suit, informing Tony the world thinks he's dead. This kid, Harley Keener, played by Ty Simpkins, becoming Tony's sidekick for a little while. And their relationship is pretty fun, and as child actors are hit and miss, he pretty much hits here, Ty doing well to bring the character's written standoffishness well. Pepper gets the message, which elicits some decent acting from Goop Girl, and she leaves with Meeee, who believes Killian is working for the Mandarin, explaining how Extremis caused the explosions. So we get to see Killian as he wanders into the Mandarin set, showing as we know he indeed is supporting the Mandarin, who we get to see enter and begin his next propaganda film. Back in Tennessee, Harley takes Tony to the site of the bomb, the official story being the soldier was highly decorated, but due to mental distress, killed himself with a bomb, killing 6 people. 5 who are now burned into the walls, just like at the theatre. It's a pretty haunting visual, well communicated, making it far more terrifying than when Doctor Who did it.
Burn with me.
No, thank you.
Harley is utterly unhelpful when Tony starts having anxiety again, but he quickly gets back to the point, seeking out the soldier's mother, bumping into a woman on his way into the bar. I wonder if she'll turn up again. Tony arrives with her ready to give the file to someone, which Tony takes advantage of. But the woman comes back into the bar to arrest Tony, starting a pretty great fight, or series of. This movie may have missteps, but it gets its action very right. The mother hides the file as the woman starts fighting the resisting local cops. But just before Tony can get out, Minion appears with just the smarmiest attitude. Harley comes in clutch and Tony does well to escape the woman. Minion comes back with Harley as a hostage, but Harley once again hits Minion with a device that Tony gave him, so they both escape. Tony leaving the kid here to be safe.
So now you're just gonna leave me here, like my dad?
Yeah.
Minion wakes up after the Mandarin makes his next big move, seen by the Vice President, played by Miguel Ferrer. One of 4 actors I managed to forget were in this film that left me gobsmacked on this watch. An accountant of an oil business is executed by the Mandarin live, and even though the President decides to cater into the Mandarin's small demand, against his advisor's advice, he executes the man anyway, so in retaliation, he sends Rhodey to Pakistan to find the signal's origin. Tony figures out the bad guy by flipping the goddamn file over, so missing in action, MIA, flips to AIM, which I bet had the writers celebrating over creating that mystery. While Rhodey gets nowhere fast, but as Tony calls him mid-attack, he gives Tony the AIM access he needs, as AIM were the ones who did the touch-ups on his suit. We then cut to a Christmas pageant Tony drives past, which, apart from the women in bikinis I can't figure out the purpose of, apart from getting us a great Stan Lee cameo. But Tony, with the help of a second surprise actor, Adam Pally, who is just the creepiest fan, and I wish this scene was over quicker, but with the news van dish, Tony manages to get the AIM files he needs, a bunch of ex-soldiers with major injuries, including everyone who's shown extremists until this point, are given it by Aldrich Killian in quite the painful process. A few of them combusting mid-experiment, the failures all combusting like the guy in Tennessee. We go back to Pepper now, hiding in a hotel room with Maya, who has a pretty good speech about how her research went so wrong, but Killian comes in quickly, mercilessly killing a waiter, and as he kidnaps Pepper, he and Maya talk, her uncaring of his actions, having been at the mansion to smooth things over to keep Tony alive and useful, now with Pepper as their insurance against him to make extremists marketable. Rhodey is still looking for the Mandarin, being very confused, but is attacked by the third actor I forgot was in this, Rebecca Mader, who uses her extremists to knock out and take both Rhodey and the suit. Thanks to Harley and Jarvis, Tony locates the Mandarin, but at the threat of the suit failing, he has another attack, which Harley actually helps him down from this time, and gives Tony a great idea. Now without his suit, he needs something new to get to the Mandarin, so buys a bunch of stuff at a hardware store, like some sort of serial bomber, to raid the Mandarin's base with minimal tech. An action scene that's not only great for the character, but is just pretty awesome from an action perspective, both in Tony's actions and in the spontaneous weaponry itself. The mansion looks like it's been through a massive party with a few half-naked women, and Tony comes across the Mandarin. But not quite. This semi-charming fool is Trevor Slattery, a down-on-his-luck, drug-loving actor who thinks the Mandarin is the role of a lifetime, an old legend used by AIM to cover themselves and further their agenda. Tony gets caught from behind, waking up tied to a bed frame alone with Maya. I guess someone's into kinky shit, but I can't decide whether it's her or Aldrich. But before Tony can get to her morals, Killian comes in to monologue. He's actually kind of menacing, although kind of in an incel way. Strange how I mean that as a compliment. He gets the point across as he shows him Pepper going through the extremist process. But Maya finally comes to her senses, holding herself hostage with a deadly dose of the drug. But Aldrich pretty easily takes her out, realizing he only needs Tony. There isn't much fanfare after Maya's death, only Tony's reaction in the moment really relating to it. But to be fair, the film doesn't do much to endear her in the first place. Whereas, at least as far as characters that are introduced in this movie go, Killian, Trevor, and Harley all feeling better fleshed out. As Tony stews playing off against 2 minions, Killian uses his power to melt Rhodey out of the armor, him doing some pretty badass moves against Minion, but is subdued again after a nice effect from Aldrich.
You breathe fire? Okay.
Tony's armor dysfunction isn't as funny as the writers thought it was, but the action that comes with it is very well done, as in a callback to the beginning of the film, he gets the pieces one by one, and has to opt for gun over repulsor.
Honestly, I hate working here. They are so weird.
Eventually, he gets the full suit and meets Rhodey outside, who continued to fight his way out after waking up, and they secure the Mandarin. Rhodey using maximum effort. Trevor doesn't work well with Rhodey, but easily spills that the evil plans have something to do with the vice president, who Tony warns of the danger, but he opts to spend time with his family instead, failing to inform the president of anything. And in an excellent twist, seriously, I was kind of blown away, he heads to his daughter, lovingly kisses her on the head, and the camera pans down to her footless leg, immediately not only telling us all we need to know about the Vice's character, but also making him sympathetic. Another layer to this mind blow is that his daughter is played by a young Jenna Ortega. The fourth actor I managed to forget was in this film. This movie is crazy. And it also furthers the fact that everything I do in this channel somehow manages to be 5 degrees from Jenna Ortega. The president is coming aboard Air Force One, and no one manages to realize the silent armor isn't Rhodey until he starts murdering everyone aboard in quite brutal fashion, save for the president, who gets sent away with the armor, leaving Minion for Tony to fight. But they don't get very far before Minion blows a hole in the plane. Wow, they really should have checked who was under that armor. You just know that this is Pauline Hanson's favorite MCU film. So after Tony unibeams right through Minion, we'll miss him dearly, we get a pretty imaginative sequence where Tony zooms through the air and with some electro trickery manages to catch and save all the people like a barrel of monkeys, dropping them into the water at a safe speed. It's a little silly, but just the right amount to get that cheesy superhero feeling. The suit is destroyed by bad driving, revealing Tony is still with Rhodey, but the workers have finally finished excavating the mansion, allowing Tony to summon backup. We come to the climax as Aldrich has Pepper and the president getting strangely close and sexually charged with one of them, and it's not the president. Aldrich shows us our third act scene, a pretty well shot shipyard, and is planning to have the Mandarin kill the president with some dramatic irony. But they better look out because they've got 2 unsuited guys coming for them. For while they're unarmored, the action and buddy comedy is pretty good, the armor coming in clutch, but not just one,
All of them.
with some pretty cool variancy. Jarvis is running them remotely to target all extremist goons, and once again the action is good, and although I was expecting otherwise in parts, I thought most of the effects were solid as well. Tony finds Pepper trapped under rubble, but he's interrupted by Aldrich, who gets really weird.
Stuck? You feel a little stuck? Like a little turtle? Cooking in his little turtle soup?
But the structure keeps collapsing as they fight, Tony using the suits to his advantage, trying to get one only to be repeatedly interrupted while Rhodey goes for the president, getting to do some badass maneuvers. Tony just fails to save Pepper by an inch, leaving her to fall into the burning tanker, so with her dead, he beelines to Aldrich and having their fight be mostly physical instead of one suit of armor shooting another armor, like in the past 2 movies, does great to make it stand out. Tony's suit swapping and the action choreographed well. Tony's main armor comes in with deflating comedy but pays off as he puts the suit on Killian and sets it to self-destruct. But after a cool shot of the helmet, it's revealed he survived, but just barely, calling out, "I am the Mandarin!" And while it's comedically interrupted, this is what made many fans turn on this film, and what largely garnered its negative reactions, and to be honest, I was disappointed too. The Mandarin, while I don't know him from the comics, seems to be an ever-changing character, as I quite liked the version in Armored Adventures, and was disappointed that this didn't live up to that, or his Lego set. But not being a major fan of the character in general, and having the foreknowledge of All Hail the King and Shang-Chi, I think it was clever that Aldrich adapted an old legend and then created Trevor's Mandarin. I just think if the movie made it clearer beyond one offhanded comment from Tony that there was an old legend Mandarin that could possibly still be around, maybe even including a little bit of what happened in All Hail the King in the film, this wouldn't have pissed off as many as it did. Before we went on that tangent, it's revealed that Pepper was the one that hit Killian, but due to her extremist, Jarvis targets her, so she destroys it and then blows Killian up. And in a declaration of love and Christmas, I suppose, Tony vows to make the extremist stable in Pepper and blows his remaining suits like a fireworks display. Because it's not like in a few movies' time, he'll build other suits for other purposes, a bunch of robots to replace them, thinking they're needed, while making the added mistake of creating a rogue evil AI. You know, like the AI that just erroneously targeted Pepper. Wow, I'm getting mad at Age of Ultron now. I think we've still got a couple movies to go before we reach that point. Him and Pepper are happy, and Tony gets a decent speech as we see the Vice President and Trevor arrested, and Tony finally gets the shrapnel removed from his body, no longer needing the arc reactor within him, happy waking up, and Harley coming home to a renovated shed as a new lab. courtesy of Tony. And the film ends as he takes one last look over where the mansion used to be, tossing his arc reactor over the side, and finally saving Dummy! Yes, we won! And of course, after a pretty well stylized credits sequence, we get the after credits, which is a nice little joke where Tony tries to get help from Banner, who really isn't a therapist kind of doctor. Trust me, he has a lot of his own shit going on. So that was Iron Man 3, and, well, it might be one of, if not my favourite of the Iron Man films. Sure, it has missteps, the exploration of Tony's anxiety kind of just stops by the climax. Maya could have used a little more exploration, not all of the dry comedy hit, and although nowadays I enjoy the twist, it does kind of fuck up one of Iron Man's long-standing villains worse than the Lego set did. But the CGI and action was solid. Trevor, while not being a good villain, I found very charming, and I will be happy the multiple times he pops up later in the MCU, and Tony and Rhodey's dynamic worked far better than the past movie. Pepper was used well, even acted well by Miss Goop herself, finally allowed to put long pants and shoes on after that scene in Avengers, but at the caveat of doing the climax without a shirt. And Robert Downey Jr. was great as ever as Iron Man, selling the character's journey as even if the display of his anxiety and panic isn't 100% accurate, he puts effort into trying to have it come across naturally in a character that consistently tries to stay aloof like Tony. While Aldrich got a little creepy, Guy Pearce leaned into it well, keeping a nice balance of rich CEO charm and under-the-surface sociopathy. But while the Mandarin idea isn't amazing, I did find his plan as a whole quite compelling. I'm stuck on where to rate this. As a whole, I think Iron Man is a more solid movie from its writing and character work alone, but this was definitely above Iron Man 2, so I'm happy to start this phase off on as high a note as last time. So while I'm on the fence between a 7.5 and an 8 out of 10, I'll match it to the first film, all the better to see how phase 2 is handled compared to its predecessor. I wonder what movie comes next. Oh, fuck. Thank you everybody for watching my review of Iron Man 2. Please like the video if you liked it, comment down below if you wish, consider subscribing to the channel, and if you do, ring the notification bell so you're told every single time that I make an upload. Once again, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next review. Bye!
Toast. A little piece of toast. Because there's so much to choose from. There's brown bread, white bread, all sorts of wholemeal bread. It comes in funny packages with writing on the side.